Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
And good Friday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 23rd of January. As always, we hope you're keeping up to date with the latest weather information for your part of Alaska with NOAA Weather Radio, Marine VHF, or following us online at weather.gov/Alaska or arh.noaa.gov. The weather info line's open at 800-472-0391. You see all the social media outlets there from NWS Alaska on Facebook. Many of you have been giving us your snow reports and pictures or no snow reports across South Central just yet, but just wait for it. It's coming. And around Twitter, NWS Alaska, NWS Anchorage, NWS Fairbanks, or NWS Juneau will all get you in touch with your local Weather Service forecast office for your region. And if you use the hashtag AKwx, which is short for Alaska Weather, of course, that'll help us watch more of your comments about the weather, and that helps us do a better job so you can have a better day and know what's coming your way. Find us on YouTube in the afternoon around 4 o'clock. You'll get kind of a sneak peek of the surface weather charts for all of Alaska. And again, you can look at AKwx TV after this show and find the complete broadcast that you're watching right now. Watch it again. The Alaska weather headlines as we see it. Pretty stormy Gulf of Alaska. What that means for you in Southeast, windy and wet, at least for the start of the weekend. Another surge of rain and wind will move into central and southern parts of Southeast after an already waterlogged week. A snowy start to the weekend in South Central and the interior. A good surge of moisture moving northward over the Alaska Range means very wintry conditions for areas around Denali to the Deltana and Tanana Flats region. Fairbanks is seeing plenty of snow right now, and Anchorage and South Central will be looking at similar conditions through the evening and overnight. And dangerous wind chills for the north and western coasts as that east and northeasterly flow wraps around the coastal areas. Wind chill values of 45 to even 50 below are possible. Here's the advisories and warnings as we see them right now. We'll start with the red areas. These are winter storm warnings for the Deltana and Tanana Flats regions and the Alaska Range. You're looking at winter storm warnings that'll take you well into tomorrow. Around Denali, you could be looking at about 8 to 12, even 16-inch totals there in some cases. Those will be on the higher side. The middle Tanana Valley, including regions around Fairbanks, looking at some higher snowfall totals as well. For areas west of North Pole, you're expecting a storm total of around 4 to 8 inches, I believe. And then east of North Pole, probably 8 to 12 inches of snow. Again, that's a storm total. For the Deltana and Tanana Flats region and the 40-mile country, you're looking at totals closer to 6 to 9 inches by the time it's all said and done. And then south of the Alaska Range, winter weather advisories are in effect there for the Copper River Basin. That'll take you through tomorrow. And for the Susitna Valley, the Matanuska Valley, the Anchorage Bowl, and the western Kenai Peninsula as the band of snow is shifting from areas closer to the Susitna Valley and right over Cook Inlet. It is now moving eastward and will take it into the Matanuska Valley, the Anchorage Bowl, and the western Kenai Peninsula. So from this point onward, we should be looking at more snow in South Central. Let's take a look up north. A winter storm warning for areas across the eastern Beaufort Seacoast thanks to reduced visibility, or I'm sorry, poor visibility there. Look for blizzard conditions, I should say. That's what I'm trying to get out of my mouth. A little cold, I guess. Look for wind chill values down to about 50 below and reduced visibility because of that blowing snow. So blizzard conditions there through tonight and into tomorrow. And wind chill advisories there for the north coast and north of the Brooks Range, where the wind chill values could make it feel like 45 below. And for the interior parts of the Seward Peninsula, the northern coast and the western tip, all the way up to St. Lawrence Island and the Chukchi Seacoast, you're looking at, again, wind chill values that feel like 45 below. So again, that puts you in danger. If you're going to be outside for any length of time, make sure it's a short trip. Make sure that you're covered up and making extra precautions to keep yourself and your skin healthy and safe there if you're going to be outside any length of time. Nothing doing in the southwest right now in the Aleutians. Things are fairly quiet. Some stratiform precipitation as we see on the satellite picture. Look out to the west, though, and that kind of gets your attention, doesn't it? South of the Kamchatka Peninsula, a hefty area of low pressure there across the western and northern Pacific. This is pushing warmer and wetter air, and it's going to nudge up into the Aleutians as we go through the rest of the weekend. As we get closer to Saturday night and Sunday, we'll see the winds come up a little bit more for the chain and probably start to see a little bit better chance for showery precipitation, not only of rain and snow mix, but eventually probably a little bit more rain for the central and western areas of the chain as you get closer and closer to some of that warmer air. So there's some changes coming your way thanks to this big push of warm and wet air from the south. But if you're in the western sections of Alaska, you're saying, is that going to get here? No, probably not. Not anytime soon. The cold air and the wind is pouring off. In fact, you can see those fingers of drier air pushing their way out into the western coast. That cold air rushing off the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta and all the villages around Bethel, Norton Sound, and the Seward Peninsula, making it feel oh so cold as that cold air is rushing off the Arctic, over the continent, and again, very dry conditions still working their way off the west coast. For south central and southeast, that is totally not the case. Low pressure here across the Gulf has been working its way northward, pushing that warm and wet air into the Copper River Basin, into Prince William Sound, and a jet stream blowing its way pretty strong from the south, pushing that moisture further and further northward, and really lining things up right over Cook Inlet to enhance the snowfall opportunities for places like the Susitna Valley earlier today and tonight. And for southeast, moisture wrapping its way up through the inner channels, really brought down the rain in places like Ketchikan, as you know all too well this week. Very soggy conditions. Another surge of that will be working its way northward tonight with more rain and probably a lot of wind too. So if you've got some flying plans tomorrow, make sure you're taking a double look at the charts, especially over the inner channels. There could be some turbulence in that area and pretty gusty winds changing throughout the day from more of a south to a northerly orientation as the storm system is on the move. So keep your eyes on southeast if you're moving around there tomorrow doing any flying or any marine activity there. Things again will be changing throughout the day. Up north, snow still moving through the interior. Again, we're looking for additional snowfall totals from the middle Tanana Valley and points east. The snow will be spreading into the northern parts of the Yukon, and then finally drier air will settle in. And when it does, temperatures are going to drop. If you've been fairly mild so far this winter in south central, conditions are going to change throughout the weekend. Once that clear dry air comes in behind this, things are going to get cold pretty quick. So if you've been waiting for snowy and wintry and more kind of a seasonal weather and you haven't had it yet, chances are you're going to get a taste. For southeast, warm and wet conditions today. Temps mostly in the 40s. We'll expect some rain across most areas there tonight. The snow level's hovering around 2,000 feet or so around Haines and Skagway, so it doesn't look like most areas are going to be getting into the snow zone there unless you're going up the highway. Across the middle and eastern interior, snow continues for you on the north side of that warm front. On the back side there, clear and cold conditions for many. Unless you're in the middle Yukon Valley, you might see some patchy fog there. Otherwise, brisk winds still moving through the west coast and dropping that feels like index to about 45 to 50 below. Snow showers possible up across the north, as well as blizzard conditions for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, and snow showers are possible around the Bering Sea communities and the Aleutians. High pressure sitting just north of the Bering Strait at 1,025 millibars, pushing against low pressure here across south central, so moving a lot of cold air off the continent and into the Bering Sea. Out across the North Pacific, you can see low pressure, what we were watching there on the satellite loop, nudging northward into the Aleutians. And here's our storm dropping to 979 millibars now just along the southeastern coastline. It's going to keep the rain and the wind going, and that's working against low pressure just north of Prince William Sound. So as that's moving through tomorrow, it will bring an end to the snow across south central gradually throughout the Saturday evening, overnight into Sunday period, but it's also going to combine with low pressure across eastern sections of the Gulf of Alaska. So that's going to keep low pressure across the northern Gulf by Sunday. It will gradually bring in drier air to the Cook Inlet region and Kodiak Island, but it should keep rainfall across southeastern Alaska. It does not seem to drop that snow level too much across northern parts of southeast. So right now we're talking about rain for Juneau all the way down to Ketchikan once again. And out across the west, you'll notice we now have room for that North Pacific storm to move north and eastward just a little bit more. That brings low pressure to 984 millibars around Adak and Atka. And on the north side of that, there's plenty of room for rain and snow to mix from Dutch Harbor and Unalaska all the way out towards Shemya and Attu. North of St. Matthew, chance for some snow showers there, but high pressure is also dropping southward. And once again, with all this comes some bitter cold across the interior, the lower and middle Yukon and the Kuskokwim valleys, southwestern Alaska. Everybody's going to get into that very frigid Arctic weather that many of us have been missing so far this season. Temps this afternoon in the mid to upper 40s for many in southeast. A fairly mild day if you just look at the temperature log, but probably not the nicest of days with rain and wind in the region. Around Prince William Sound, we saw temps in the 30s and 40s. Cordova was 40, but on the other side, Whittier was a much colder 26. Rain and snow today in places like Seward. Homer was 33. Kenai was 22 with more snow moving in throughout the late afternoon. 20 around Anchorage, 19 for Talkeetna. In Fairbanks today, 6 below and plenty of snow as we hear it around the region. 7 above in Eagle today, 1 below in Northway. Further north around Fort Yukon, it was 4 below, and then we really get into the cold. The further north and west you go, you see temps in the 20, even 30 below range, 35 degrees below around Ambler and Bettles. 18 below in Anaktuvik. Ambler itself was 17 below. Up around Kivalina, it was 14 below. Nome was 13 below. So again, a lot of really frigid air just waiting to drop southward with this. McGrath was 12 below. Bethel 9 below. Southwestern Alaska in the single digits and low teens around Dillingham. The Alaska Peninsula, single digits and teens, 20s and 30s a little bit further down the Alaska Peninsula coastline. Falls Pass and Cold Bay a little bit milder there. Adak and Atka in the mid 30s. Dutch Harbor and Unalaska 31. 21 in St. Paul and 22 in St. George. Overnight low temperatures now could crash to about 40 below in some places like Galena, maybe even colder there. The Arctic coast 20 to 30 below. Nome looking at 25 below, probably 5 to 10 below in Bristol Bay. 20s and 30s for the Chain and the Alaska Peninsula. 30 in Kodiak. Lower 40s for southeast, not a whole lot of change for you. Teens, 20s and 30s for south central with the coldest air on the western side of the Parks Highway. That's moving eastward tomorrow. Lower to mid 20s for daytime highs, but look for much colder weather as we get into Sunday. Again, single digit territory for many in south central. Mid 40s for southeast on Saturday. Teens, 20s for Bristol Bay, 20s and 30s for the Peninsula and the Chain. And once again for the interior, especially Fairbanks and east, you're looking at temps at or below 0 in the middle 10 in Ottawa Valley. Eagle and Northway could be above 0 on the warmer side of the system, but everything to the west, anywhere from 15 to 20, even 30 below in the heart of the interior up around Bettles and northward. Flying weather now. IFR conditions are on the eastern side of the storm that's producing snow for the interior and south central as you would expect, also for the Copper River Basin into the Wrangell-St. Elias region, and then we'll see hit and miss conditions there across southeast with the worst weather in the morning for visibility, but look for rain to be fairly widespread throughout the region, so that could change conditions on an isolated or case-by-case basis. Watch for some of the worst visibility to linger though around Craig, Klawock, and Ketchikan, maybe Annette as well. In the north, IFR conditions generally east of Barrow to about Prudhoe Bay and Kaktovik, and then around the Bering Strait communities, St. Lawrence Island especially north to the northern end of the Gulf of Anadyr. You could expect IFR. MVFR widespread across most of the Bering and IFR conditions just south of Shemya. Pass conditions in detail, Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass we expect to be MVFR, maybe some improvement throughout the day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass should have a much brighter day for tomorrow. VFR conditions in Rainy Pass as well, but the further east you go, things still changing, probably holding on to IFR, maybe MVFR for Windy Pass. IFR conditions are expected in Isabel Pass tomorrow, slowly moving toward IFR conditions from MVFR. And Mentasta Pass, Tanita Pass, we expect to see socked in at IFR conditions through most of the day. Porter's Pass, some improvements are possible, maybe as much as VFR. And Chilkoot and White Pass may see the ceilings lift just a little bit in the afternoon to MVFR conditions, but a start at IFR is expected. The freezing level shows intense cold working its way southward. Now the surface freezing line dropping south of Kodiak Island tomorrow and west of Nikolsky. You can see that north of Adak and Atka, and that warm and wet air is being pushed into the eastern Gulf. Otherwise, status quo for most of Alaska. Icing potential is running above 2,000 feet. Higher surge of kind of occasional moderate there across the eastern, the far eastern Alcan border all the way toward Copper River Basin and the eastern Gulf. And many areas in southeast are looking at least light to isolated moderate there. Some of that will be above 4,000 feet and between 2 and about 3,000 feet out across the west with some light to isolated moderate for some of the western chain. The jet stream shows an elongated trough of low pressure across western Alaska. That's allowing the cold up north to drop down south right now. And an active weather pattern across the north and west Pacific is allowing that stronger storm to move out of areas closer to eastern Asia and much closer to the Aleutians by the end of the weekend. At 9,000 feet, you see our trough here that's dropping that cold air across the west coast and pushing that wetter air into southeastern Alaska. Some stronger wind speeds here, around 50 knots or so, and the winds diminish as you head out to the west, but they're still running in from the north and west around 20 to 25 knots. At 3,000 feet, winds are almost due north coming into the Arctic coast. North and northeasterly winds across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, about 20 to 30 knots there. Low pressure in tandem across the Gulf of Alaska. Wind speeds fairly light as you get into the southern Yukon territory. Otherwise, north and northeasterly winds sweeping across south central, and our southwesterly winds considerably stronger here across the central and southern parts of southeast, and that is why we're watching for some turbulence tomorrow. You'll see that below 10,000 feet there, at least widespread moderate. I wouldn't be surprised to see that around Petersburg and point southward tomorrow. A decent amount of chop there, anywhere below 10,000 feet wrapping into the Prince William Sound region, and also across the central and western Aleutians below 4,000 feet. There may be some isolated cases of light to isolated chop around the Alaska Range, especially the eastern end up the Alcan border, as low pressure is working its way north and east. Behind that, just a lot of cold developing across the west. That's a look at your aviation forecast as we head into the weekend. We'll be back with a look at the sea ice edge and your marine weather here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ed Cornfield. On behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to another edition of Hangar Flying. My guest tonight is Jay Baldwin, who owns Alaska Cub Training Specialists, specializes in off-airport and survival training. I've asked him to come back to the show to talk about some of his flying adventures, and welcome back to Hangar Flying, Jay.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
So we started discussing some adventures last time, and we had some pictures that we showed. Here's one that's, maybe you can describe what's coming up on the screen now.
Yeah, this is just a fun day up on Lake George, of all things. The icebergs that break off the glacier and float across the lake, of course, deteriorate over a number of summers of melting. And by the time they've been out there in the lake for a couple of years, they get some really gnarly caves and arches and things in them. They're kind of like old men. They start to take on some strange personalities, and this was just a day when you had good glare ice out there. We could land on the wheels and pull the airplanes over and go exploring the old glaciers on the
So what size tires do you have on the
we usually have 31s or 35s, but all of the tires for this application, you could use virtually anything. It's glare ice out there on the lake.
And how do you know what the depth of the ice is, what the thickness of the ice is?
There's a lot of methods to do it. Of course, by late in the winter, very often you have 3 or 4 or 5 feet of ice, real thick ice. This time of year, on a kind of a warm fall, it might be a little touchy. But generally speaking, you can fly over glare ice in this case and actually see the fracture lines in the ice. And you'll see kind of a flat plate as you fly over low and look down at it. You can actually see the reflection of the fracture lines as, of course, the ice heaves and breaks with heat and surging underneath, and it'll form a plate that you can actually see. Wow, that ice is a foot thick or 2 feet thick and stuff like that.
Right.
So there's a number of ways to determine the thickness of ice.
Oh, good. So I know you do a lot of Iditarod type flying in that time of the year. You take people out. How long have you been doing that?
More than 10 years now. I'd say probably 12 or 13 years we've chased the race to Nome. It's my favorite tour of the year, just because you're challenging the elements, the Arctic elements. You're on skis, which is just a great configuration of airplanes. And this is
a picture of
yeah. We're camping with a 4-ship there at Mini Sporting House in Iditarod. Yeah.
So that's the town of Iditarod we see in the background
you
there.
You bet.
And so you said you take people from different experience levels and bring them on. How do you train people for that?
Well, we train some people from scratch. Some folks that know they're going to go to bush flying, they're going to be doing off-field flying. We'll train them from scratch. A lot of my clients, though, are very experienced pilots from all over the world who've flown lots of different types of airplanes. What they haven't done is gone off-field very much. So they come to me sometimes with tail drag experience, sometimes not, and we check them out in how to operate a tail dragger off-field on different types of surfaces.
So this is another kind of picture coming up, specialized flying. Tell us about this one.
Yes, this is a steep uphill landing in the Talkeetna Mountains. Steep uphill landings are exciting, they're fun. In the wintertime on skis, it opens up huge areas of the state to land on once the tundra up high is covered with snow and nice and smooth, fabulous views. However, it also entails doing things like flying directly into a mountain, which is a nightmare that all of us have had at some time in our aviation careers. And so you have to develop not only examine your psychological fears for flying to the mountain, but also talk over how you're going to accomplish it. For instance, touching down, adding power instead of pulling power off, flying right straight into the mountain until you see the ground rush. You don't want to flare early, or you start losing speed that you're going to need later in the flare to run up that mountain. And then finally, you've got to turn 90 degrees at the top of the slide, or you end up falling backwards and jamming the ski in the snow, and now you're what we call hung up. Yeah. And you can't get out. So a lot of neat little techniques, exciting, but nonetheless challenging. You've got to think things through how you're going to do it. And that's true of all of our bush flying. You have to really think it through. And of course, your best advice is to, if you haven't done it before, get an experienced instructor to go with you the first time. Or you can learn the hard way. Unfortunately, that's how I had to learn in many cases. So, but generally speaking, getting some instruction, getting someone that's done this before will help you get over the hurdles when you're first trying. Well, we just have a little bit of time left. I'm going to put another picture up, and this is like an oops picture. Maybe you can yeah, and this is a huge portion of why we train, is that I tell people I came to Alaska, and the reason we developed survival flying is because I did tear up a couple airplanes right from the beginning. So we make the assumption that we're going to damage an airplane, and the only thing standing between us and that damage is how well we think on a particular day, what kind of choices we make. And that's what we train our students from the very beginning, or the very experienced guys. And when they know that I've wrecked airplanes, that usually they sit up and start paying attention to what we have to say and start following the concepts of survival flying pretty explicitly. Well, Jay, that's about all the time we have, and I want to thank you very much for joining us on Hangar Flying, and we'll have you back another time on the show. But folks, thank you very much for watching, and fly safe.
All right, we'll have another Hangar Flying episode on Monday, so wait for more there. Here's a look at sea ice edge, and you'll notice that sea ice edge is dropping further and further south, and with cold air spreading south, and a deep cold at that, no doubt we'll see additional growth as we head through the weekend and into early parts of next week. It is in Bristol Bay now. You can see some light concentrations across the northern end of the Cook Inlet, and we'll see. There's St. Matthew out to the west. We'll see how far south it drops over the weekend, and have another update for you Saturday, Sunday, and again on Monday. Here's a look at the forecast now in southeastern Alaska. By the end of the day, we'll have northerlies moving out of the Lynn Canal and into Stevens Passage there. But earlier in the day, those are going to be south and southeasterly winds, so watch for this change to take shape. 15 to 25 knots heading southward during the day, and southeasterlies coming into the Clarence Strait with 4 to 7 foot seas on a 35-knot wind. North and easterly winds also developing along the coastal areas, 15 to as high as 40-knot winds, but those 40-knot winds are coming in from the south and east with the storm system that's working its way up the coast again. So look for that warmer and wetter air to work its way towards Sitka by Saturday night and Sunday. By Sunday, we're looking at an onshore flow there from the west and southwest, 20 to about 25 knots, seas from 13 to as high as maybe 14 feet outside of the Dixon entrance. Otherwise, you're looking at a south and southeasterly flow, about 25 knots on the inside, with 5-foot seas for Sunday afternoon. For south central, light southwesterlies developing in Prince William Sound by the end of the day. Northerlies coming down Cook Inlet, 10 to 20 knots. Watch for freezing spray there. Northwesterlies will still be strong, especially west of the Barren Islands, up to 40 knots there with a 14-foot sea. Northwesterlies working across Kodiak Island, slowly improving the weather but dropping the temperature. And westerlies across the northern Gulf from 20 to 25 knots with seas ranging from 11 to as high as 12 feet. By Sunday, north and northwesterly winds are starting to pick up in more places, 10 to 15 knots in Cook Inlet. Northwesterlies across the Barren Islands, westerly winds at 25 knots for Kodiak Island, and northwesterlies around the Prince William Sound region. Look for more of a due west flow just outside of Hitchinbrook entrance there with an 11-foot sea on a 25-knot wind. Across the Alaska Peninsula, northerlies will be in charge on Saturday, 20 to 25 knots on the Bering Sea coast, 30 to 35 knots on the Pacific side with 10 to 12-foot seas, and freezing spray will be an issue just south of the ice edge. North and easterly winds in the Bering on Sunday at 20 knots with 3 to 4-foot seas in open waters, and northwesterlies from Chignik to Castle Cape with a 7-foot sea, southeasterlies from Sand Point to False Pass with a 5-foot sea expected on Sunday. For the Aleutians, northeasterly winds make their way all the way to Unalaska and kind of stop right around Nikolsky, and that's where the east and southeasterly winds pick up around 20 knots on either side of the coast there, with 8 to 9-foot seas on the Bering side, 8 to 9-foot seas also on the Pacific side. And we get into that east and southeasterly wind a little bit more, feeding into the next storm for Kiska and Attu at 25 to 30 knots for Saturday. That becomes more of a northeasterly wind for Attu as we get into Sunday afternoon at 15-foot seas with a 30-knot wind from the north and east. East and southeast winds continue for areas from Adak, Atka to Nikolsky and Unalaska, more of an easterly flow north of Unalaska, with an 11-foot sea in the Bering and 9 to 11-foot seas in the Pacific for Sunday afternoon. For the west coast, obviously we're dealing with ice there around St. Lawrence Island and points southward toward Nunivak Island. 15 to 20-knot winds from the north, 25-knot winds in the Kuskokwim Bay. Otherwise, northeasterlies in the Pribilofs, only 15 knots there, still watching for some freezing spray near the ice edge, and southeasterlies near the St. Matthew Island waters. The winds will pick up in the Pribilofs as we head into Sunday with a 30-knot wind and 9-foot seas, and northeasterlies from St. Lawrence Island to Kuskokwim Bay, around 20 knots or so, 3-foot seas in the ice-free waters. Across the North Slope, westerlies are really zipping across areas near Kaktovik and the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. Once again, there's a brisk wind advisory for the offshore areas, and blizzard warnings are in effect tonight and into early tomorrow for poor visibility and dangerous wind chills in the region. Northerlies coming down just north of the Bering Strait there, 10 to 15 knots, and you'll see those turn just a little bit to the north and east there, north of Point Hope to about 10 knots. Otherwise, westerlies continue from Barrow to Kaktovik, 15 to 20 knots. Recapping tonight's weather, we still have snow falling across south central Alaska. That should pick up for more of the areas from the western Kenai Peninsula, Anchorage, into the Matanuska Valley, and slowly wind down for the Susitna Valley as we head into tomorrow morning. Behind that, much clearer, colder weather coming in from western Alaska. Rain and wind is expected in southeastern Alaska tonight, and we expect more falling snow, some of that heavy at times around the Denali region and also for some parts of the Alaska range. Now for the middle Tanana Valley, including Fairbanks and the North Pole area, accumulating snow will be possible there, especially east of North Pole, and for the 40-mile country and the Deltana and Tanana Flats region, upwards of 4 to 9 inches of additional snowfall is possible there. Saturday, look for colder, drier, windier weather for the west, and dangerous wind chills continue for the west coast. That's your Alaska weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.